Hi, this is Michelle Watterson, the Karate Hottie, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
This is Filthy Rich. You're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Will Brooks, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
This is Vicky Spot Virgin.
I'm Lance Martin Palmer.
I'm Calvin Kidia. You're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Ib, the E.T. Ting, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Yo, this is Dan, the Hangman Hooker, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Did you hear the one about me being a drum? Did you hear the one about me losing my nerve?
Hey, fight fans, welcome back to another edition of Stand and Bang Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Robbins, and with me as always is Mark Modeski. Mark, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great, Aaron. How you hanging?
How am I hanging? Currently I'm not hanging. I'm sitting on my couch, but thanks for asking. We also have our semi-regular co-host, Fred Kirby from Gem City Fighting. Fred, how are you hanging?
I am hanging just fine, Aaron. How are you doing, fellas?
We're all doing really good. Our special guest tonight is UFC Lightweight Paul Felder. Paul, how are you doing over there?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for being on your show. Say thanks to Rob, your manager, for getting you on. And before we start the news, I want to let everybody know that we are associated with LUB-MMA.com, LUB-MMA.com. Go ahead and go over there to check out your daily news articles and updates about fighters. It is a 100% profit-free organization, so everything that they make on sponsorships goes back to the fighters. I also want to say we're very proud to have Unique Kennels on our banner. They are the official bulldog of MMA. Check them out on Twitter at Unique Kennels 71. They are a breeder of 5 English bulldogs for over 30 years. His name is Jamie Skipper. You can also find him on Facebook at Unique Kennels /Conway. They have some very exciting news. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but it looks like they are going to be opening up another kennel in Hawaii with Kendall Grove. And of course, Kendall Grove is going to be fighting for the middleweight title versus Brandon Halsey over in Bellator. So congratulations, Jamie, on the new kennel opening up. And I would say without further ado, why don't we go ahead and check out the relevant MMA news this week? Sound good, fellas?
Let's do it.
All right, so I was watching MMA Insiders over on Access TV with Boss Rutan, and they had a 2-part interview with Dana White. And on one of the parts, it was hinted very strongly, and Dana kind of has that face. You know he's a poker player. He wins in blackjack tournaments. He's kind of a big thing over at Caesar's Palace. But I wouldn't say that he has the biggest poker face when it comes to the UFC doing exciting things. And when he was pressed about the cage ban being lifted in New York, it sounds like to me that the way he's thinking is that they have actually held a date near the end of the year for Madison Square Garden. So I don't know about you guys, but I am outrageously excited about that. It sounds like some politician over there has other fish to fry, and I don't want to get on to that because that's not this kind of show. But the guy who kept kind of being the fly in the ointment for the UFC getting over to New York has other things that he has to do, and now it looks like Zoof is going to be able to get that legislation to get the cage ban lifted over in New York. Paul, what do you think about that? What would it be like to be in Madison Square Garden as a UFC fighter?
Man, that would be ridiculous. It's just been so long that they've held out on letting us fight up in New York, and being from Philadelphia, it's about a 2-hour drive from here, and we're always having these fights in Newark, New Jersey, which is my next fight coming up, and I just think that same kind of card could be even bigger and better right there in New York City. I mean, I love going to New York. I've got a ton of friends up there. So for me, being an East Coast guy, fighting in New York City, it would be amazing. I mean, so many boxers and, big-time fights have happened there. It'd just kind of be really awesome to be a part of history. And it's just something that MMA guys haven't had a chance to do because of the restrictions that they put on New York and not letting us get in there. So, I mean, just finding that out in the last couple of days, I heard a couple rumors myself. Hearing that, I would really like to actually try to get on that card now that that might happen.
Yeah, we would love to see you over in New York, and it's a little bit ridiculous. You can fight in Jersey, you can't fight in New York. So this is just one of those bureaucratic, political nightmares that just doesn't make any sense. Fred, I want to throw this over to you. You and I have talked about this. Lifting up that cage ban over in New York, do you think that would raise the legitimacy level of the sport, letting us over there in Madison Square Garden?
Absolutely. New York is like one of the biggest markets on planet Earth. The fact that MMA is still illegal there is absolutely ridiculous. One of the best fighters in the sport right now, Chris Weidman, is a New Yorker. He trains in New York. He came up in New York. It's ridiculous that it's not legal there already. I just worry that I hope Dana's not jumping the gun on this, because a year or two ago, we had Dana's word that it was a guaranteed done deal for sure thing. By the end of the year, MMA would be in New York. Now, you made a good point that a certain politician is not in power no more that was kind of preventing that from happening. So I'm just hoping that this actually comes through. But yeah, if it happens, and the thing is, it's a win-win. New York is going to do great economically if they can hold an event. The UFC does great. All the fighters win. It's absurd that it hasn't happened yet. So yeah, great for everybody.
All right, Mark, what do you think about being able to go to New York, check out the sites, and also some fights?
I mean, I think, honestly, it's amazing. I remember when they repealed the MMA ban in Toronto, which is around my neighborhood, which would be sort of the heart and soul of Canada. I'm just making that claim myself, by the way. I don't speak for all Canadians. But at any rate, it's the largest market in Canada. And when they had the UFC at the Rogers Centre, the first UFC there, it was absurd. It was enormous. Everybody was excited. The town was on fire. And I mean, you know, New York is, you know, Toronto sort of pales in the shadow of New York at the end of the day. You're looking at a city of, you know, 6 million as opposed to New York, which is got to be over 20 if you include all the great areas of greater boroughs of New York. So I think it would be awesome for the sport in terms of visibility, let alone, to Fred's point, bring a little bit more legitimacy, seeing that it's getting more acceptance across the country. It's a huge market, and I think probably the most exciting part for me personally is, you know, that card, if it comes through, is going to be stacked top to bottom. Like, it is going to be an obscene card, and there's going to be every single fighter's going to want to be on that card and fighting to get his name on there. But I think that they would put together an awesome show for that.
You know what? I agree with all of you guys, and the thing that excites me, and, you know, Canada does have bragging rights, being that they actually held the most lucrative UFC event ever when GSP fought there. I believe that with this being a historic event, like Mark said, they're going to stack the card, and Madison Square Garden honestly being a huge venue, I think that this could be one of the more exciting, more valuable things that the UFC has ever done. I really hope that the cage ban is lifted over in New York. It would be great to see another venue open up. And that kind of leads us in perfectly to another thing that has happened. The cage ban has been officially lifted in Victoria, Australia, and that's what leads us to UFC Adelaide. Guys like Vic Gruchek, Richie Walsh, and some other Australian fighters. I don't know if Richie will be on because he had just lost a fight to Alan Jouban. But it's going to open up cage fighting, actual cage fighting, which before they could perform MMA. MMA was legal, but the cage was banned. And I was talking with Paul earlier. Paul, you've done some sparring in a ring as opposed to a cage. Tell the fans why the ring is a really bad idea for MMA.
I mean, the whole thing is open. Whether you go through it, over it, under it, you know, there's no keeping you in it. I mean, the whole point of the cage is, you know, with the way that we fight with takedowns and wrestling and jiu-jitsu, we move all over the place. And for somebody to do a blast double leg in a ring, you can literally paralyze a guy. I mean, if a guy falls out of a boxing ring with a double leg and lands on his neck, I mean, the guy could literally be killed. Even just pressing a guy against the ropes, trying to throw knees in Thai boxing, you see guys flip over backwards in a ring. I mean, the cage, I know the whole idea of we're in a cage, I guess, scares some people, but it's so much safer. It's kind of ridiculous to think, oh no, you guys can have MMA. That's all well and good, but it's got to be in a ring. It's like, well, do you want more people to get hurt or less people? That's I didn't even know about that. That's kind of silly. So I'm glad they went and changed that. That just makes so much more sense.
Yeah, actually, the prevailing government did actually say that. They had advertisements showing, of course, a fighter all bloody and bashed, and that was their kind of like their whole campaign that, oh, look at what happens in the cage. Of course, they didn't have all of the pride moments where fighter after fighter
was fine, but
yeah,
you know.
Exactly. You can stomp a guy's face or soccer kick him all you want, but don't put him in a cage because that'll make him scared. But Mark, you remember the old Pride days and how hard it was to keep the athletes inside of the ropes. Do you remember back in the day where if a body part went out, you had all of these little Asian guys kind of pushing the fighters back in?
Oh, yeah, and to be honest, I mean, that's a really great point that Paul brings up about just, the safety to the fighters that actually introduces. I mean, I think just the connotation of a cage is just, people get this instantaneous negative sort of image in their head about, what it's all about. But to Paul's point, I mean, look at, the number of, the number of issues the UFC's had versus Pride back in the day. Nothing versus, again, like you say, Aaron, several. The cage is a tool too. I mean, it's part of the fight game, learning how to use it to your advantage or how to, whether you're in a defensive position or an offensive position. So, I can't even imagine going back to Pride style fighting, honestly.
Fred, I want to throw it over to you. What do you think, besides the safety issue, just opening up another international venue, you've got to be excited about the fact that the government finally kind of had some common sense, lifted that because, again, legitimacy and revenue for the area. I mean, are you excited for the UFC Adelaide?
Oh, yeah, it's super exciting that a new international market is going to open up like that. And I think them lifting the cage ban, what it's really going to do is it's going to give Australian mixed martial arts the opportunity to grow. Kind of to piggyback on what Mark said, this is an integral part of how the high-level game works. So these cats that are coming up in Australia need to be able to train in a cage so that they get used to that. You talk about the old Pride days. You can look no further than Crow Cop of a guy who flat said it, Jack. Like he said when he came over that the cage was awkward and it was weird. And he had spent so many years training and fighting in a ring that the transition to the cage really kind of threw him off and threw off his game a little bit. So, yeah, I think that it's a good thing. And for all the cats coming up in Australia that want to be professional mixed martial artists, it's going to help them train tremendously more effectively.
Yeah, I agree. Now, Paul, you do all of your training in a cage. Just hypothetically, if they took that away from you, how detrimental would that be to your training?
It'd be huge. Just like you guys were talking about. I mean, when you're in the octagon or the cage or any kind of cage, I mean, especially a guy like myself who tends to be more of a striker and wants to be on his feet, we've learned over the years of training MMA and as it's evolved as a sport to use the cage. I mean, back in the day, people were trying to stay away from the cage because they thought they were getting trapped. Now, as wrestling defense, I mean, I spend almost every day at some point on my butt up against the fence trying to get back up, learning how to whizzer and get up and hit a switch or turn the guy around or land in sneaky elbows with him pressed against the fence. To not have that and just be in an open space or a rope type situation where guys are kind of leaning or falling off or getting reset back to the middle. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. The whole point is if I pin you against the fence or vice versa, if the guy's got me pinned against the fence, I've got to work out of there. You don't just restart me back in the middle. That would be bad for me and my style. If somebody was like, hook break, I'm going to put you right in the center now. I'm like, well, now I got to work back that way to get back up. It would be weird, man, to not have a fence or even a wall to work off of. It's just something I do every day in training. I'm against the wall or against a cage.
Now, kind of elaborate on that for the fight fans who have never trained. From what I understand, the cage actually becomes like an extra hand or an extra leg that you actually train to use that friction and that leverage to stand back up.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine, especially with wrestlers and these guys that are just so good at getting you down, it's to get up in the open is so much more difficult. I mean, you got to press on their head, push away, find space. But if there's nowhere else to go, so when you're against the fence, I mean, I at least know there's nothing else behind me. There's me, the guy in front of me, and the cage behind me. And I don't need to use all of my muscles to get up. I can kind of lean and shimmy up against the fence. And the more pressure that guy kind of puts into you, it kind of makes it, you know what I mean? It's almost like he's pushing you into the wall, helping you up. And you don't have to worry about him getting behind you. Guys try to sneak around for chokes. If you can press your back against the cage, that guy's not getting a rear naked choke. He might be punching you in the face, but he's not behind you. So, I mean, there's all kinds of strategies that we go over and tricks that guys are developing and, coaches are coming up with just to use the fence. I mean, I wouldn't take a fight right now if somebody was like, oh, yeah, we want you to fight in this giant open mat. I'd be like, no, I want the fence.
I just wanted real quick to impress upon fans how important that legislation is. Cage fighting, MMA inside of the cage, UFC inside of the cage, the octagon. It's not just a trademark. That is actually one of the tools that these guys have learned throughout years, so we need that cage. And I'd say for the last few minutes before we take our first break, I am excited about this next season of The Ultimate Fighter. That's what we're going to segue to now. I can't tell you the last time I was excited about a season of The Ultimate Fighter. I enjoyed Tough 20. I enjoyed the females. The strawweights were great. The one before that, we have a few friends of the show who've been on that were on Tough 19. I'm very sorry. That season was difficult to watch. And it was kind of a culmination of seasons that just kind of got worse and worse and tried to kind of copy what happened the last season, but you can't rekindle the fire that they had in those first 2 or 3 seasons of The Ultimate Fighter until now. It's going to be Tough 21, American Top Team versus the Blackzilians, and just so you guys know about this, there's going to be a $500,000 prize on the line. There's going to be a team trophy, and there is a lot of bad blood going on. The way that this started is that Dan Lambert started American Top Team down in Coconut Creek, Florida in 2001. Subsequently, some of the athletes decided to, I'd say, defect from that gym. They went about 20 minutes away, started the Blackzilians with a businessman named Glenn Robinson, and here sets up some of the worst blood between two camps in MMA, which is going to be very exciting because I'm sure that there's going to be all sorts of team pride on the line, and we might actually get to see that animosity that brings out good fights. Mark, what are you thinking about this season of Ultimate Fighter? Are you going to be tuning in?
I'm going to be tuning in for sure, Aaron. I think, they're putting a bit of a new ingredient into the recipe this particular season, coming from an advertising background. I mean, the key to getting people's attention at the end of the day is you got to be relevant, you got to be different. I mean, every season's had that relevant fighting aspect to it, but if you're not giving me something different in there to sort of get my excitement up or attract me or hook my interest, I'm not necessarily going to be, maybe as compelled, like you said in previous seasons, to tune in. I think you can't help but assume that there's going to be some really bad blood going on, as you say, in this house, and that it's going to be a very interesting dynamic and season to watch. So I'm actually pretty excited for it, to be honest. There's a lot of pride on the line, and pride makes people do some pretty crazy shit. So that's kind of where I stand.
Exactly. Fred, what are you thinking? Going to be some crazy stuff going on this season?
Yeah, it should be a really fun season, man. I didn't even really know of all the beef and the background that you just brought up, so that adds a whole new angle to it for me. That should be fun. I think one of the major problems that most mixed martial arts fans have with Tough is that the talent level has kind of dried up. It seems like a lot of these guys that get into the house now, the major beef with it is that the talent level is just kind of crap. Some of these guys got no business nowhere near the UFC. And I think that this new format will help with that. Pitting camp towards camp is going to have these guys, these guys know what talent level they got in their gyms. So I think they're going to be putting some, really exclusive, really talented guys on this show to kind of showcase their gym and showcase the guys and the talent level they got at their gym. So I think one of the major beefs that fight fans have with the show, that the fight, level is kind of weak. I think that's going to be a lot better this season. So overall, I think that people will be pleased with this season because the fights should be a lot better in general.
I hope so. All right, Paul, we're going to give you the last word on this before we take our break. Do you think that Tough 21 is going to kind of revitalize the series, and are you excited for what they're doing this time around?
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think they needed to find something to change it up. I mean, I'm a huge fan of The Ultimate Fighter just because of what it offers, up-and-coming fighters a chance to try to get noticed. A lot of these guys fight and they win fights and they get knockouts, but there's just so many of us trying to get into the UFC that it's really just hard to get noticed. It's kind of, get your lucky shot, you know what I mean? It's like making it big. It's just, you might get noticed, you might not get noticed. So I've always liked the show, but I agree it's kind of gotten a little stale just with the same format. Okay, they fight, they get in, they live in the house, and, hopefully something crazy happens. But with the, the two camps going at each other and I know guys are kind of recruited for this one. I've heard a little bit about it and some of the guys that are going to be on it, and I think it's going to be, pretty brutal, to be honest.
All right, so we are definitely looking forward to Tough 21. That's going to bring us to our first break. You've been listening to Stand and Bang Radio. You can find us over on LUB-MMA.com. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, MMApodcast.com, and pretty much anywhere else that you can find MMA podcasts.
Hi, I'm Andrea KTB Lee, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Max Leonard Holloway.
This is Charmaine Not So Sweet Tweet.
Hi, this is Kelly McGill, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Jansen Medeiros, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Stand and Bang Radio. I'm here with Mark Modeski. Mark?
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
And Fred Kirby from Gem City Fighting. Fred?
Hey, what's happening, fellas?
And, of course, we are here with Paul Felder, UFC Lightweight. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
No problem. All right, now in this segment, we're going to get to know Paul a little bit better. Fred, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about Paul's background, and you had a question for him. Why don't you go ahead and throw that out to him?
Yeah, Paul, I just had read somewhere before that you actually had done a little bit of acting in your past, something that maybe most fighters don't find themselves dabbling in before their actual fighting career jumps off. How did all that come about?
Yeah, man, I kind of baffle a lot of people when they kind of get wind that I was an actor, and I actually went to college for acting at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and like I tell people, I was always a martial artist first. It was something that I fell in love with when I was a little kid and got into when I was 12 years old. But I've just always liked performing to some extent, whether it was competing or I got into acting in high school and then in college. And I was kind of going back and forth with, I would do like a pro fight and then do a professional production of a show and then go back to training again. And eventually it got too much when I started doing really well as a professional. It was just too much to go back and forth, so I kind of had to put one on the side. And obviously, martial arts always comes first to me, so I decided to keep competing because, like I tell a lot of my friends, I can always be an old man, 80 years old, and decide, you know what, I'm going to try out for an audition, but I certainly can't fist fight people for a living at 85 years old.
That's true. So you amassed an undefeated record while you was still kind of dabbling in acting?
Yeah, man. Yeah, my first 4 professional fights and all my amateur fights. My first amateur fight was just like, oh, yeah, let me do this. This looks cool. I see some people doing this MMA stuff. I saw the first Ultimate Fighter. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And I did it, and it was like it's unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my life. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. But I waited another year. Then I fought again. And I was fighting like once a year as an amateur, not taking it seriously. And then I decided to just go pro. I was like, screw it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to make some money off of it. And I did 4 pro fights with do a couple fights, and I'd book a show, do a show for a couple months, I'd be coming to rehearsals with black eyes and stuff. It got crazy, man. And then after my 4th one, I won by knockout for 4 times in a row in like the first or second round. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm pretty good at this. Let's focus on this.
That's awesome.
All right, so it's got to be super exciting with the acting background to see several now UFC stars. Do you feel that they're kind of like, I don't know, the spear's tip, and this is going to be easier for you, amass a good UFC career, and then Ronda Rousey and others are doing this acting thing, and do you think that that's going to be kind of like your foot in the door, be like, hey, you know what, I'm also a badass, why don't you let me get into an action movie?
Yeah, man, that's my whole thing. I keep joking with all my friends, especially my actor friends who just are kind of still mind blown by that fact that I'm fighting. It's funny, my fighter friends can't believe I was ever an actor, and my actor friends that I went to school with are like, holy crap, man. Like, I see you on TV and you're smashing people in the face and stuff. So it's kind of funny to get both ends of the spectrum there. But yeah, I look at these UFC guys going off and doing movies, and it makes me laugh because, they have no idea. They're doing great, but they have no idea, how to act. They never started from there. I trained for 4 years in a conservatory to do this kind of stuff, and very seriously, not just action kind of stuff, like, real dramas and stuff. Shakespeare, man. I mean, like actual acting. So, I would love to do action stuff, but, even more importantly than that, hopefully when it's all said and done, I mean, I'd like to do some bite to it too, some actual acting, you know what I mean? Some real roles, not just, jumping out of airplanes and stuff.
No, absolutely. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, take note. P.S. I love you, and Notebook fans. Paul Felder's on the way for the sequels coming up. So.
There you go. See, that's what I need, man. I might have a little cauliflower ear and, a broken nose and some scars, but, chicks dig scars, right? So hopefully that works to my advantage.
No, absolutely. Now, for me, I would like to see you in roles more like what Liam Neeson is doing right now. But, I guess, you could be like, what is it, Channing Tatum? Because he does well in both, right. You know what I mean? You kind of go here and then do a little rom-com.
He makes movies about fighting. I can make movies about fighting. I actually know how to fight. I didn't come from a stripper background. I came from fighting in a cage. Put me in those movies.
Well, I don't want to get into the whole Magic Mike thing. That's a different podcast on a completely different level. But, I am curious. Mark, I'm going to throw this over to you because you and I were talking about this. You had something that you wanted to ask Paul about Cage Fury. Why don't you go ahead and throw that out?
Yeah, Paul, as you kind of spoke to there, you were doing some damage, getting some knockouts in a row, and you had some pretty impressive knockouts, to be honest, after watching your fights. At what point did you sort of see the UFC or sort of recruiters from the UFC starting to take notice in your performance, and when did that sort of transition start to pull over?
I went 4-0, and I knew it was still early in my career, and I knew I needed a few more fights. But I'd say it was after my fifth or sixth fight. My fifth fight, I had this war with this kid who was from AMA, who was training with Jim Miller and all those guys at the time, and he was supposed to be like this next thing. Everybody was talking about how he's pushing all the UFC guys around in the room, he's taking them down, and I booked a fight with this kid thinking like, all right, well let's see what happens. And I've never been a college wrestler or a high school wrestler, and this kid was like a D2 national champ in his weight division. So kid had some serious wrestling, and he broke my nose in the first round, and I was bleeding all over the place, and I still managed to get on top every round, dropped him a couple times, took him down a few times, and this is a kid that they're talking is pushing this guy around, and I think it was after that fight, I didn't think I was going to get the call yet, but that was when for myself I thought, man, maybe I really can get up there, because this guy was supposed to be the next thing, and I just took his thunder, and then I was getting looked at. Then I fought Julian Lane and Mark Stevens, and started after the spinning hook kick with Craig Johnson, who was another Division I wrestler, and was supposed to be able to just take me down and beat me, knock him out cold with a spinning hook kick. After doing stuff like that, that's when I was like, okay, just keep doing what I'm doing, and that kind of stuff's going to get me noticed. And it was the next day after that Craig Johnson fight. I was at a bar with all my friends and teammates, and little did I know that they had already known that my manager had talked to Joe Silva and booked a fight for me, and they came in and they were like, cheers to the UFC. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? Don't jinx it. Not yet. And they were like, no, man. And he pulled out his phone, and it was an email from Joe Silva saying, October 4th, Jason Sago, does he want it? I was like, oh, crap. So it all kind of just whirlwind after those last two title fights that I had.
So, what was that like? First time out and, okay, you get the big news that you're out there. You're probably like, 12-year-old schoolgirl type thing, all excited and stuff. But like the first time actually stepping out onto the big stage, we've seen numerous fighters sort of react to that in different ways. What was sort of your take first time, again, being under the bright lights?
I thought, man, I really thought I was going to be okay. I'd fought, some tough guys in Cage Fury, and they do a pretty nice show at the Borgata in Atlantic City, but man, I even went to a smaller city in Halifax, and it was one of the smaller shows, and it was still, once I got out there, and it was his hometown, and those lights, and that scenario, first round goes by, and I was like, holy crap, I'm exhausted. And I was in phenomenal shape for that fight. I was training at altitude in Albuquerque with Cowboy and the crew. I went from one fight right to the next. There was no reason I should have been tired, but for some reason I was a little overwhelmed and wasn't fighting like myself. But I dug deep and we got through it and I got the W. All I wanted for that first was just getting my hand raised. And it was insane, the interviews, the photos that you take. It's just like, even just putting those gloves on for the first time and looking down and seeing UFC. I mean, this is what we all want. If anybody says they don't want to be in the UFC, they're lying to you.
We don't really hear too many guys say, you know what I mean, I'm in the RFA and that's exactly where I want to stay, or even Bellator or anything like that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said after the Sago fight that you didn't really feel like you had put on a performance. That wasn't you. So when you went into the Danny Castillo fight, you had said that this was actually your first official fight. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, I really wanted to show everybody that I kind of took that fight, and I'm taking nothing against Jason Sago, who is a stud. I really do believe that people kind of, he hasn't fought that many times. He's 1-1 in the UFC, but I really think he's a talented fighter, and it's also one of the reasons that I had such a hard time. Is not only because of UFC jitters, but just because the guy is, I'm pretty sure he's a black belt now in jiu-jitsu. He's got pretty good Muay Thai, and he pressed me. But yeah, I wanted to show everybody I didn't let my hands go. I didn't let my kicks go. I let some elbows and knees go and still managed to impress a few people, but that was not me. And anybody that trains with me in the gym can tell you that I'm just significantly more vicious than that when it comes to throwing strikes and trying to finish fights. And I wanted to really show that with the Castillo fight. It was supposed to be actually a fight in Boston. I was supposed to fight 2 weeks later, but we booked that fight with Castillo last minute. And I was just talking to Cerrone, and he's like, well, here's your chance, man. Show them that you belong here.
No, and you were going to face Johnny Case 2 weeks later. Then you get Castillo. We had talked about that fight. You were kind of under the radar with the Sago fight. And what I had said to Mark then was, what I like about Danny Castillo is that he gets knocked out spectacularly. And then, you come out and you perform like you did. Now, for the fans that are listening, kind of compare the jitters from the first time to the second time and tell people how sweet is that when you know that you landed that knockout shot.
It was insane. I mean, the fight had been going my way anyway, so I was kind of starting to have fun. Unlike the Canada fight where I was just, a nervous mess, just like, got to get through this, got to win this fight, got to win every exchange, just surviving in the first fight too, kind of finding my rhythm, and, not forcing the knockout, not looking for too many huge bombs, just letting my kicks and punches kind of find their places. And it was going my way. And I remember in the second round, I barely even sat down. I just wanted to keep going, and being at the MGM, I was feeling it. That's what I've always wanted. And then when I felt that back fist land and I turned back around, you never know when you turn back around with a spinning technique if the guy's dead or, just going to pop back up. And I turned around and he was flat on his back. And I watched the replay. I can't believe the amount of distance I covered from hitting him to flying in for that second right hand. It looks like I'm in fast forward. I just wanted to make sure that fight was over, because that was a career change for me.
No, absolutely. Fred, did you get to see that stunning back fist? You got anything you want to ask Paul about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was just an amazing knockout. Like he said, too, man, I'm sure the octagon jitters are real, man. That first performance is probably hard to get over. And I'm sure he just felt amazing being able to actually kind of, even though he won his first fight, redeem himself and show what he's actually capable of. That's got to be a great source of redemption. I do have a quick question for Paul, though. I'm kind of curious. I've got this thing with weight cutting here real recently. How much weight do you cut to get to lightweight? Do you cut a significant amount? Like, what is your walking around weight?
It varies depending on how long in between fights. But I'm usually most of the time I'm walking around in the 180s. As heavy as, like 187, maybe closer to 190 if I'm like getting fat and out of shape, but usually in shape 184, 185.
Okay. So not a terrible weight cut. Then.
No, I'm not. I don't. And I think a lot of people think that about me after that last fight. I saw a lot of comments where people are like, "Oh my God, he's huge," but I don't get up to like 200 pounds. I think the difference is that I'm that weight and I'm lean. You know what I mean? I'm 185, 180 and cut up. You know, I'm not 180 and fat. So there's a difference. There's some lightweights that'll be like, "Oh yeah, I get up to 195 pounds." I'm like, "Yeah, and you're fat." You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So there's a difference. I like to stay in shape just in case. So I still cut. Yeah, I'm cutting at least 30 pounds from beginning to end, and the last 10 are freaking miserable. I can tell you that much.
Okay.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. A 30-pound weight cut. I kind of figured that you cut a little bit less than that. So, Fred, good question there. Now we do have you coming up here against Jim Miller, April 18th. On Fox 15. You've already fought some of Jim Miller's training partners or gym partners. Kind of give us your thoughts on Jim Miller and what kind of fight we should expect there.
Fireworks. Jim is a stud, man. He's not afraid to take the fight anywhere. He's great at jiu-jitsu, so, you know, I'm thinking he's going to want to try to get a hold of me and make it dirty inside and then, you know, hope that I make a mistake and get a choke or a submission. But I'll tell you what, he's the kind of guy, too, where if we start exchanging blows, he's not going to be afraid to stand in the pocket and get a fight of the night alongside me. So I think me and Miller got a good chance of walking away with some extra money in our pockets, and I hope we do, man. We're going to put on a show that night. I know there's some big fights that night, but look forward to me and Jim stealing the show is all I can say. I'm going to come ready, and I know Jim's excited to get in there. He's a good dude. I have nothing against him, man. And it's going to be a mutual, let's do this handshake at the weigh-ins.
Well, you talk about him being good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You can't be any slouch. I mean, you train out of Daniel Gracie's academy in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, I train with Daniel Gracie and, Jonathan Webb and a bunch of other guys that I train with, too. I mean, there's no lack of black belts and high-level jiu-jitsu guys that I train with. And when I do go out to Albuquerque, I mean, for anybody that really knows the game, you guys know, Cowboy Cerrone might not be walking around with a gi and a black belt on, but he's one of the best jiu-jitsu guys I've ever trained with. And we've got other guys coming from all over when we're up there training. So I'm constantly surrounded by guys that are really good on the ground, really good wrestlers. So yeah, no, by no means am I a slouch when it comes to wrestling or jiu-jitsu. It's just, I grew up striking. So, I mean, my preference is, to let my kickboxing flow. But I mean, if I find a submission, if it's in front of me, for sure, I'm not going to pass it up.
Hey, Mark, is there anything that you want to ask Paul before we finish up with the interview portion of our show?
Yeah, just one more quick question, actually. Paul, I hear you got some big news coming down the way on a personal level in your family. Anything you want to kind of share with all of our listeners out there?
Yeah, I'm expecting my first child, May 10th. So kind of right after this fight with Jim, I'll be, getting ready to put on my daddy pants. And, we have a little girl on the way, me and my, girlfriend,
Awesome.
Christine. So, these last two fights have been pretty crucial to, getting ready for the family life. So, yeah, we got a little girl on the way. It's my first kid. I'm pretty excited about that. So I'm glad that I was able to squeeze in another huge fight with Jim close to home for this fight. It's really awesome that it's right in Newark because it's really close to home. It's only about an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So she'll be able to be there, and hopefully I can walk away with another W and then have my baby, and then we'll go from there.
Okay,
that's awesome.
That is absolutely awesome. Now, with a baby on the way, does that mean paternity leave for Paul Felder or just right back to the gym?
We're going to have a little bit of a leave, but I live so close to my gym anyway that as long as she's doing okay and the girlfriend's doing okay, I'm sure I'm going to be able to keep to training as long as, I'm getting sleep. Hopefully that works out for the best. But that's why this fight's really important to me is to get one in so that if I have to take a month off or a few weeks of just getting settled in, I have that, option. but I'm always training, man. I'll be doing push-ups and sit-ups while holding that baby. I'm always working, so that's not going to be a problem.
Well, all I have to say is, from experience on the sleep thing, good luck. But anyways, congratulations on your first child, and that's going to bring us to our second break. Fans, you've been listening to Stand and Bang Radio. We've got Paul Felder here with us tonight. We're going to take a short break, and we will be back with breakdowns for UFC 185. You can find Stand and Bang on iTunes, Stitcher, MMA Podcast, and pretty much anywhere else you can find fine MMA podcasts. Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Stand and Bang Radio. I'm here with Mark Modeski.
Hey, how you doing, all?
Fred Kirby.
Hey, what's happening, fellas?
And Paul Felder.
Hey, what's up?
And we want to say a special thanks to Paul for being on the show. He is a UFC lightweight. And what we're going to do now is our pick'ems, or our predictions, for UFC 185, Pettis versus Dos Anjos. And a fight card for me wouldn't be complete on the FX prelims without Josh Copeland versus Rosholt. I told the guys that I would rush through all of these prelims so we could talk about the main card, but I can't because we have Josh Copeland, Cuddly Bear, against Jared Rosholt, the Big Show. Josh Copeland always looks to me like a dude that they just picked out of the crowd. Now, I'm sure he hits hard. He's a heavyweight. But then we got Jared Rosholt, who's obviously, for 265 pounds, he's got definition. He's a legit wrestler, a legit striker, and so it always boggles my mind that Josh Copeland is sitting around with a 9-1 record. Paul, are you familiar with any of these giant guys?
You know, it might be the kind of thing where if I see them, I would know who you're talking about, but just off the top of my head, I'm not sure of the two guys that you're talking about.
Well, after the show, make sure you get onto UFC.com.
I will definitely check out the Cuddly Bear. That's for sure.
The Cuddly Bear. Now, Fred, I know that you know these two guys. What do you think about this fight?
I gotta say, I do love his nickname, the Cuddly Bear. That is awesome. Although it sounds incredibly boring as far as it goes, but the Cuddly Bear, I love that. It's ironic. They should call Jared the Cuddly Bear because I think that's exactly what he's going to do with Josh Copeland in this fight. Rosholt's a great wrestler, man, and I don't think there's no mistake about what he's going to try to do in this fight. He's going to try to use his wrestling, and I think he'll be successful. I think Jared Rosholt should win this fight with relative ease. He better. He's expected to. So,
Mark, what's your prediction?
Yeah, I got to back up Fred on this one because, I mean, I don't know. Rosholt's just like he's a machine. He's looks like he trains a lot, trains well. Copeland looks like somebody stuck a bicycle pump up Fedor's ass and just pump until he's about to blow. So I just, I don't know, man. He looks like he's just an inflated version of Fedor Emelianenko, honestly. Look him up if you haven't seen him out there. I got to go with Rosholt anyway on this one.
All right, that's going to bring us over to the lightweight division, and I'm sure Paul will know a little bit more about these guys. Darren Cruikshank is coming back from his horrific eye poke versus Beneil Dariush. Now, on this one, I know what Darren can do when he's on the money. I have been impressed with Dariush, 9-1. Darren's over 16-5-0. I think Darren's going to come back healthy. I think he's going to have something to prove, and I think we're going to see him set down and try to make a statement. So I'm going to go Cruikshank on this one. Fred, what do you think?
I really like Darren Cruikshank, man. A lot like Paul, I like his fighting style. I love a good, creative striker, and Cruikshank's kicks are nasty, man. They're creative, they're devastating, and most importantly, he fights to finish fights. He's a fun fighter to watch, man. So I'm definitely pulling for him. I think if he wins, it'll always be exciting. But Dariush is definitely a talented fighter. I have definitely taken notice of him, but I'm rooting for Cruikshank. I hope he wins because he's exciting to watch, man.
All right, Paul, this is your division. Who are you picking in this one?
Yeah, I think if Darren can put his kicks and his combinations together, he is one of the more dangerous strikers in the division and creative strikers in the division. He's not, a straight Muay Thai guy. And what I think people forget about with him is actually how good his wrestling is. If he can time his takedowns with his combinations, I think he takes that fight for sure.
All right, Mark, you get the last one on this. Crookshank or Darush?
Yeah, I think we're going to go 4-0 on this one behind Crookshank because, I always love the pressure fighters. I always, feel at the end of the day that the guy who puts the heat on the fight is the one who's going to really, especially on some of these undercard ones where guys really got a point to prove because he wants to get up on that main card. I feel like Crookshank's that guy. I'm pretty sure he's going to clean this one.
All right, that's going to bring us to the middleweights. Elias Theodoro, the Spartan, versus Roger Narvaez. Now, I commented on Roger last time. He was brought into a Texas card, and in my opinion, he wasn't ready for the UFC then. He's 7-1. I wasn't impressed with his performance. Now, Elias, on the other hand, 10-0. That guy just keeps impressing and keeps impressing. He was one of the guys on The Ultimate Fighter. Talk about a guy who could go into acting. He might not have to act at all. All he'd have to do is smile, and he could be in the notebook. But this guy, he's a grinder. Do you know what I mean? You kind of look at him, you're not so sure because he's got those pretty boy looks. And then when he gets right into it, you know that this guy enjoys fighting. Mark, what do you think about these two guys? Who are you going with?
As anybody, including yourself, knows who's ever listened to this show, I'm a bit of a homer when it comes to fighters. So, I got to go with my boy from Mississauga, which is, about 45 minutes away from where I live. So I'm going with Elias on this one. I almost kind of feel like this is a fight for Elias to take it to the next level. Let's put it that way. I almost feel like the UFC is setting it up that way, but what do I know?
To make him look good. Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Okay, and now you said you're a bit of a homer. I thought you were a bit of a hoser.
Well, homer, hoser, okay. Get your Canadian dig in. Come on, get it in. I haven't heard any GSP comments yet, but I'm sure they're coming too.
No, I just wanted to make fun of you one time for being Canadian. I can't help myself. All right, Fred, let's pass it over to you. Theodoro or Narvaez?
I go along with what Mark's saying. I think they're lining Theodoro up here for a showcase fight. He's a good-looking kid. He's undefeated. He showed a lot of promise. But I will say, I think Roger Narvaez is tough, man. I think his only loss is actually to Patrick Cummins at 205. And he's coming off a win over Luke Barnett, I think, which is nothing to sneeze at. So
yeah, but did you watch that fight?
Nah, whatever. Let's not get into semantics.
Yeah, all right.
He's got a win over Luke Barnett. I do think that Theodoro will win this fight, but it's definitely a good test to see exactly how good he is. He won't be a pushover. I'm picking Theodoro, but it could be a lot closer than a showcase fight for him. That's for sure.
All right, Paul, what do you have to say on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to go the same. He fought the same night I did. I'm pretty sure he was on that Halifax card that I was on. So
yep.
I'm going to go with him, man.
All right, that's going to bring us over to Pearson versus Stout. Now, to me, this is a very interesting fight. I like these guys. In the lightweight division, I've been watching Sam Stout way back since he came over to the UFC and started fighting Spencer Fisher. They had some great wars. Ross Pearson, I have kind of lost confidence in Ross. It looked like when he came out of the Ultimate Fighter, he was going to be on fire. He was the tough fire plug kind of guy. And now it almost seems like not that his skills are diminished, but his durability seems to be diminished. Sam Stout, on the same note, not that his skills are diminished, but he was a straight kickboxer when he came to the UFC, and he is focused in on his ground game, and I really hope that no matter how this fight goes, I just want to see them go at each other and, stand and bang, as it were. Honestly, I don't have a favorite in this one, but I do think that if Sam can put his hands on Ross Pearson's chin, I think it'll be a fast night for Ross Pearson. Paul, once again, this is your division, so what do you think about these two guys?
Yeah, I got to say, man, I agree. These are both guys that I really enjoy watching, and especially Sam Stout. Coming up before I was even really fighting pro, I was watching this guy throw down and mix it up in the octagon. So, but I think I'm going to go with Pearson, actually, because I think Sam's got the same problem now that he's been in so many wars that if he gets touched, I think he's going to kind of fall apart a little bit too. And I think Ross, coming off that loss, I think he's going to want to prove that he's still relevant in the division. So I'm going to go ahead and give a slight edge to Ross Pearson on this one.
All right, well said. Fred?
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Paul on this one, man. I think that Sam Stout might be a bit towards the end of his career here. I think that he's been around forever. You know what I mean? He's been alternating wins with losses for quite a while now. And even though Ross Pearson has not really lived up to all of his potential, I think this is a fight that he could win if he just stays aggressive and stays on Sam Stout from the beginning. I think that he actually could end up getting a finish. I think that Stout will not hold up very well with getting socked. And I think that at the very least, I think you'll get your wish. I think they will stand and bang. And I think eventually in one of those exchanges, the real deal will get a finish.
All right, Mark, you get the last word on the fight. Who you picking?
This is, you know what, I've been thinking about this one for a while, and this is a really tough fight to call either way, and I think we've come to an agreement on that. Again, as a bit of a homer/hoser, I got to go with Sam Stout. I've been watching him forever, and he's a machine. And, at the end of the day, these guys have both very similar records in terms of wins and losses. They've had some really, great wins over really tough guys, and they've had some really tough, crushing losses over, again, tough guys. Sam could get tapped on the chin, sure, and probably fall to pieces, but man, I just wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of either of those fists from Sam Stout. So I'm going to go with Stout on this one just again because I'm really on the fence and I can't call either, and I always go towards Canada whenever I can't make a decision. So
all right, so
that's where I'm at.
50-50 split on that fight. That's going to bring us to the 125-pound division. Henry Cejudo versus Chris Carriazo. On this one, I don't really have a pick'em so much as I do believe that this is going to be the fight with Chris is really going to see if Cejudo is what everybody thinks he is. He's 7-0 right now. But Chris is absolutely no joke, and I think that this is definitely going to be the fight where we see, is Cejudo the phenom that everybody thinks he is, or is this going to be where we kind of see the cracks in his armor? Paul, what do you think?
Give me a little, where's that kid from, the 7-0 kid?
Cejudo, you know what, I'm not exactly sure where he's from.
He's from L.A.
But I do know that it's his wrestling that kind of sets him apart. Now, are you familiar with either of these guys?
But the other dudes, the other guy, what's his name? He's a good wrestler too, though, right?
They're both very good wrestlers, yes.
Yeah, but I think, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the other guy's name. He fought for
Cejudo.
Carriazo?
Carriazo, yeah, actually, he fought for the title, did he not?
Yeah, he's got some hands on him, so I'm going to go with him just based on his hands.
Okay, so you're going to go Carriazo?
Yeah, because they're two guys that I'm not, that division, I watch it when I can, but just, I'm always focused more on the lightweights anyway. I haven't seen too many of the flyweights, but he's a scrappy kid. I know exactly who that is, so I'm going to go with him for that one.
All right, perfect. Mark, what do you have to say on this one?
I'm going to go Cejudo on this one. I just got a feeling this is his fight.
Okay, gut feeling on that one. Fred, what do you have to say before we move on to the big guys?
Listen, Cejudo's major fight is with the scale. This guy has a horrible time making weight, man. If he can make weight and be healthy and come into this fight right, I think he's got a really good shot to win. His wrestling is phenomenal. His top control is super impressive. If he can just make the cut, he'll be fine. But as I was talking about earlier in the show, I think some guys would actually benefit from not cutting all that weight. If they can barely make it, maybe they should think about going up. And I had thought that they were actually going to make him move up, but
yeah, is he the guy that hasn't even made weight yet?
No, I think he has, but he's had some issues with it several times.
I know what we're talking about. Yeah,
I think he made it. His last fight was against Dustin Kimura, and I think he made weight in that fight, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a big deal, and he's had a major issue with the weight cutting. If he can get his weight right, he should win this fight. But if not, I think Chris Carriazo makes the weight easy. He's fought for the belt. Like, he could very well end up styling on Henry if Henry's not prepared.
All right. Well, that's going to bring us into two guys who have no problem cutting weight because I don't believe they do it. Roy Nelson, Big Country. We all know that he likes his KFC. And Alistair Overeem, The Ream, which I'm still on the fence about that nickname. That's more like the Probe, or I don't know. I'm not so sure about that nickname altogether. But we got Big Country. We all know Big Country hits real hard. He started as a grappler. He can definitely submit you. Then he realized that he could knock people out, and he's been doing that ever since. He's coming off the loss to Hunt, the walk-away knockout to Hunt, and then Alistair Overeem is coming off a victory of Stefan Struve. I'm not really sure if that's anything to be super proud of, being that Stefan has the heart troubles and family troubles and personal troubles and everything else. In my opinion, this is how this fight could happen. If Roy Nelson puts his fist anywhere near Alistair Overeem's head, it's going to be a short night for Alistair. I'm going Big Country all the way. Fred?
Yeah, that's a good assessment, man. I think that this fight seems extremely easy to predict. Roy Nelson punches really hard, and Alistair Overeem has had a tendency to get punched in the face since he's gotten to the UFC. I think this is obviously Roy Nelson's fight to lose. Roy Nelson probably has the better grappling. And at this point in the game, I'm willing to say that he's the better striker. He certainly finds a way to land that knockout punch a little bit more effectively than Alistair does these days. So, Roy Nelson is definitely the money bet for sure.
All right, Paul, who do you have in this one?
Man, this one's a little tough for me because, Alistair's out in New Mexico, and he's a really good dude, man. And, I see him every day in the gym when I'm out there, and he's a super cool dude. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my boy, Alistair Overeem, for this one. Although I agree with you guys, he's got to be super smart for this fight, or he can get tagged by Roy, and if he does, could be a lot of trouble. But I'm hoping that he plays it really smart, uses his size, and lets those kicks rip, and hopefully he catches him on the chin.
All right, that's very very diplomatic of you, and you got to go with your teammate. That's understandable. Mark, we're going to give you the last word.
Yeah, this one, regardless of fan allegiance or training partner allegiance, I think it is a tough fight to call. I think if Alistair has a good game plan coming into this, he keeps, Nelson on the outside and things like that, he's got a good chance that he could probably, pull out a win. But I've been a big Country fan since, he came into the UFC. The guy goes out and fights to win every single fight that he goes out there. And he almost doesn't even seem to give a shit if he gets knocked out. Like, he's out there to fight. He'll go 3 rounds, 5 rounds heavy, and looks like he's ready to bang every single time. I got to go with Nelson when all's said and done, but I'm just saying if Overeem comes in with the right game plan, I could see him pulling this one out, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a sure victory by any means for Nelson.
All right, so a little bit of question on this one, which is going to bring us to Johnny Hendricks versus Matt Brown. Now, on this card, I don't think there's a fight that excites me more than this one. We are seeing number one Johnny Hendricks in social media now. He is already cut. It looks like he's got his diet under control, and we all know what he can do when he's in shape. Unfortunately, his last performance where he lost the title, he wasn't in shape, and it showed. Now, on the other side of the coin, if there is a fighter that I like second best over Donald Cerrone, it would be Matt Brown. More or less just because he's a fighter's fighter. This guy is a badass. He takes a beating, he gives a beating, and he just keeps on coming and finds a way to win, and I just absolutely love that about him. Who am I going to pick? I am going to say that Johnny Hendricks this time around is going to be a little bit too much for Matt Brown because he has so much to prove and he wants to get back to that title shot. Fred, what do you think?
Well, just like Mark, I am a homer. And Matt Brown is an Ohio boy, so I am definitely rooting for Matt Brown in this fight. And, listen, everybody's going to say that their diet's going right and that camp is swell and that everything's going good and the weight cut looks good. But Johnny Hendricks has a hard time making 170. He's a very big dude. That's what I'm saying, man. I don't think necessarily he was out of shape for his last fight. I just think the cat has a hard time making 170 because he's a bit of a huge man. Listen, I think that Johnny Hendricks is going to have a rough weight cut getting down there like he always does. And unless he develops some kind of extraordinary body kick that we've not seen from him in previous fights, I think Matt Brown has a very good shot in this fight. Johnny Hendricks punches very hard, but he's a bit of a headhunter. It's not like he has an extremely technical boxing game. He punches hard and he lines up the old Dan Henderson special. if he doesn't put Matt Brown out with those shots early, I think Matt Brown could very well pour it on in the second and especially in the third round, and maybe even get a stoppage over Johnny Hendricks and shock a lot of people in this fight.
You know what? You bring up a great point with that body shot stuff, because you and I were talking earlier today, and it seems to be that's the Immortal's weakness, is the body, where he's got a great beard, strong chin, really, really hard to stun this guy. But he has that liver section there, and you're right, you know, Johnny's not a real big kicker. So, Paul, what do you think about these two guys?
Yeah, man, when I heard this fight, when it got announced, I was just excited. I'm also a huge Matt Brown fan. He's a boss, man. Dude goes out there, and it looks like he's going to get KO'd with something every time or tapped out with something, and he finds that dark place, man, and he comes back. But Johnny Hendricks is the real deal as well, man. He's no joke. So I'm going to go with a slight edge leaning towards Johnny, just because he's got so much championship experience now. He's gone 5 rounds with guys. He's been tested, you know, and like you guys are talking about, if he's not hurting too bad on that weight cut, I think he's got a fire under his butt to come out and get back in title contention.
All right, Mark, real quick before we move on to the ladies.
Yeah, this is, again, it's a bit of a tough one to call. It depends on which Johnny Hendricks, in my opinion, comes out, because for once, Fred, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't think Johnny Hendricks was in shape for his last fight. Like, you know, Aaron and I talked about this, and I mean, he didn't look like he was as fit as he usually is. He usually comes in really shredded, looking for blood. And last time he looked like he was wore out really quick, came back. And if he comes in good shape, I honestly think it's going to be his night. And he'll win. That said, the one thing I love about Matt Brown is he's the comeback kid. It doesn't matter how bad this guy is beaten or hit or whatever. He can pull out these comeback wins sometimes that are absolutely amazing. But I'm going to give a slight edge to Hendricks on this one.
All right, that's going to bring us to the women's strawweight title fight. Carla Esparza, the Cookie Monster, versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Jędrzejczyk kind of came out of nowhere. You know, we had the whole tough 20 thing and all the strawweights were there. Joanna was not there. She had a very, very impressive debut. She's got great Muay Thai striking. She's tough, and she's kind of like that whole Eastern Bloc, very serious, you know what I mean, no emotion unless it's anger kind of fighter. And so we all know what Carla can do. She is, as far as a female fighter, she is a true badass. But this one for me is a toss-up, because I really want to see what Jędrzejczyk can do with a top-level fighter. Now, that being said, I am going with the champ. I do think that Carla will have the belt at the end of the night, but I think this is going to be a very tough fight. Fred?
I agree with you on one hand, and that I think Esparza is going to win, but I kind of disagree with you in thinking that it'll be a tough fight. I don't mean to take anything away from Joanna. I just think that Carla Esparza is on a different level, and her strong suit is Joanna's weakness. And, you know, if you're wrestling and your grappling is not up to snuff, Carla Esparza is going to dust you, Jack. And quite frankly, Joanna's a great striker, but this isn't Muay Thai. And I think that Carla Esparza, honestly, I think she makes quick work of her around maybe second or third round submission.
Paul, what do you think about Carla Esparza and Joanna Jędrzejczyk?
I think it's Carla all the way. I think her wrestling and her ground and pound is going to be too much. The other girls, like you guys are all saying, she's got really good Muay Thai, but I just think the pressure for the takedown is eventually going to make sure she's on her back. And the way Carla looked in the title fight, I mean, she came out so strong. She looked even better than she did on the show. And if she comes out looking like that, I think she's going to get the finish.
All right, Mark, what do you think about the ladies?
Yeah, I'm going to put it at 4-0 on this one. I think I'm going to go with Carla.
All right, that's going to bring us to the lightweight title fight. Anthony Showtime Pettis versus Rafael dos Anjos. This one is another one. And this is one of the 3-4 fights that I absolutely love on this card. Rafael has looked great in his last 3 performances. He actually knocked out Benson Henderson. I guess there's some question on if you believe it was an early stoppage or not, but the ref stopped it, and that's that. Then, of course, we have Anthony Pettis, who is just an absolute phenom, has beaten Benson twice, once in the WEC, once in the UFC, just got off of a submission win over El Nino. I've learned from past experiences that I am not going to bet against Anthony Pettis. I am going Anthony Showtime Pettis, and I'm going to say it's probably going to be within the first 3 rounds. I think it's going to be a stoppage. Paul, these are guys in your weight class again. What do you think?
Yeah, again, I mean, these guys are top level guys, man. These are guys that I'm hoping that I'm going against in the future. And Anthony Pettis, I agree. You can't ever count him out, and you know, he's another one that's just so creative and seems to find different ways to win every time, whether it's, you know, a crazy head kick, body kick, or, you know, now showing his submission game. I don't think he's going to want to play around on the ground with Dos Anjos, but if he can keep it standing, I think he's faster. I think he's going to get the win, and I kind of hope he does, just because I would like to see my man Cowboy get another shot at him and show the world that what happened before was a good kick, but it won't ever happen again. And I'd like to see Cowboy get in there and kick his ass after this one.
Mark, what do you think about Showtime versus Dos Anjos?
I think Pettis is going to win this fight. You know, the last fight he had against, you know, Melendez, I think really showed something that, you know, that not a lot of people have maybe seen as clearly to date, and that's that he can keep his cool under the pressure and find a way to turn the game back around, because in my opinion, he was getting it taken to him at the beginning of that fight, came back out and threw in a very slick submission. And, you know, any guy who can keep his cool when he's getting that much pressure on him, no matter what, especially from a guy like Dos Anjos that knows how to really bring it to anyone, you know, I think he's on another level, to be honest. And I just, you know, he's, as we said, he's creative. He's got wicked strikes. He's shown his submission game is, you know, top notch. I mean, Melendez is no slouch. So how can you go against Pettis in this fight?
All right, Fred, you get the last word tonight.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I hate to sound kind of dicky, but I haven't been all that impressed with RDA. And I know he's had some high-level wins. He had the knockout over Benson Henderson, which is extremely impressive for sure. And his win over Nate Diaz was kind of impressive. I just don't think the way that he won those fights is going to work for him against Anthony Pettis. He is not going to land those leg kicks on Anthony Pettis. And I don't see him catching Anthony Pettis in a wild exchange like that. I think that RDA could out-wrestle Anthony Pettis possibly, but quite frankly, I think that's his only shot at winning. And at this point in the game, I think that Anthony Pettis' defensive wrestling has evolved enough that he's going to keep this fight on the feet. And at that point, even though Rafael Dos Anjos has evolved his striking a lot, his striking is a bit textbook and robotic, which can be good sometimes. But I just think against somebody like Anthony Pettis, who's extremely creative with his striking, I think he's just going to be a sitting duck on the feet. And eventually Anthony catches him with something and puts him out.
All right, so we're all going for the champ, and that's going to wrap it up for tonight. Paul, where can people find you over on Twitter?
At Felder Paul.
At
it's
Felder
the same
Paul.
on the Instagram as well.
Okay, Instagram and at Twitter at Felder Paul. Fred, where can they find you?
Kirby_MMA and at Gym City Fighting, both on Twitter.
All right, Mark, where are you on Twitter?
At Last Word Mark.
All right, and you can find our show at Stand in Bang, the word stand, the letter N, the word bang, and the word radio. Stand in Bang Radio. And that's going to wrap up our show. Want to say a quick thanks to LUB-MMA.com for the association that we have with them. Go ahead and check out Unique Kennels at Unique Kennels 71. They're breeders of fine English bulldogs. You can also find them over at Unique Kennels/Conway. And please tune in next week. We have MMA legend Pat Miletich joining us.